Today we're going to be working on my giraffe canvas, and it's a big canvas, so I'm going to be showing it to you in sections as we're working. Both of the giraffes are exactly the same. Okay, so when I give you the instruction for one, it's the same instruction for the other one. It's a mama and baby, and all I did was take the pattern and I flipped it, you know, made it smaller for the baby, so, and then large for the mama. So as far as the brushes, the wave filbert, it's like it's got little pinking shears as cut the tips. And I'm just using it for stippling. So if you have a deerfoot brush, a foliage brush, something you can stipple with, because if you look at the texture of the fur, it's very rough. And I'm going to get a little closer here. That's what the wave is being used for. And I chose the filbert only because I'm working in more rounded areas, and it's easier to stipple with a rounded brush in a rounded area than it is a square brush, but you can still do it. Okay, so the wave angle also is like you took a little pinking shears. What that is used for is at the end for doing the leaves. And what I do is I load it, and then I'm putting it down on the tips and I squish it to make those leaves. And you'll see it has a little irregular, in fact, here, those are the better ones. Okay, see how it has a little irregular edge instead of a smooth edge from a regular angle. So that's what that is for. I also can use it for the fur. Okay, so if you don't have this, a rake brush is going to work as well. Maybe like a 1/4 inch rake, if you have a 1/4 inch rake brush, will work. And I'll remind you as we get into the different areas what your options are, both for brushes as well as colors. Otherwise, it's just some basic brushes. You're going to need probably, you know, like a angle brush, a liner, and like a small round brush for doing like in the eye area and stuff. So we'll make it work. We'll make work whatever we've got. Okay. Okay. So we're going to get started right away on the eyes. I like to get those going so that I have someone to look at me. Burnt sienna is the color that I used to base coat the eyes to start with. And if you'll get just like a small round brush, or even a filbert would work. And we just want to get a nice, great big round circle with that burnt sienna. And I want a nice coverage. So we'll get that started first. Let it dry. We'll come back, do the pupil after it's dry, because you might need another coat. So we'll give it a chance to dry in between. I really love the giraffes. They're just such awesome creatures. We have some at our Minnesota Zoo, and I always enjoy looking at them. And you can feed them there too, or at least you used to be able to. I'm not sure since the restrictions what they've got going, but used to be able to feed them, and their great big long black tongues are just amazing. And fill in the ears, just the top part, not the inside, with the medium beige. And we're going to want a solid coverage, so if you need a second coat after, that's okay. At least get one on for now. So medium beige to fill in the upper part of the ears. And then I also want like a thick line right on top of that graphite line for the bottom edge of the ear, because you don't want a skinny outline. That's the actual part of the skin, and you want to be able to see it. Okay, and you're going to do that on both the ears and also on the baby. Okay, once you get the ears filled in, see if your eyes are dry and if you can get another coat of the burnt sienna in the eyes. If you have a little pencil or a chalk pencil, I think what I'd like to do is maybe though show you where the corners of the eyes are going to be when you take a look at the round circle here. Okay, find the halfway point through the eye. Come out away from it a little bit. What the eyelid is going to be is going to come to that point, and on the mama to the outside there. So I'm making a curve, and then I'm going to curve it under as well. Now those corners are going to stay black. On a giraffe, they don't have the white in their eye like we do. It's dark. Okay, so, and I probably came out a little too far on the inside. I don't want to see a lot of the corner, just a little bit. So see how little I've got on that right side. I'm going to make that a little smaller on the other side too. So a little bit smaller. I'm just creating where the eyelid line is going to be. Now the eye that goes off into the ear, you're not going to see much of that corner. You can add a little bit, but it might just blend right into the ear and the eyelashes by the time we get done. So very, very little on that side. And you'll do the same thing to the baby. I'm using the medium white now. And this first bump here is going to come and connect to the corners of my eyes. Ignore the pattern, because I want it to fit what you've drawn. And I'm going to just fill that top eyelid in solid with a round brush. The other lines are wrinkles, so don't do those. Just the eyelid is going to be more solid. So that top eyelid. Okay, and then I'll do a thinner line under. It's still not skinny because this is the actual skin under the eye. So this is the bottom eyelid. So it's a little bit of a thicker line, but it is solid. I'm going to show you how to stipple all of the fur. Now their fur really is rough looking. It's not nice and smooth and silky like you see in a lot of other types of animals. So, and that's why I'm doing the stipple, to get the texture instead of nice and smooth. And we can do that with any of the different brushes. Like I said before, I like the filbert wave because when I'm stippling, I'm just patting it, you know, with that rounded edge in the rounded areas. I could use a deer foot brush. But if I do the deer foot brush, I only want to load the toe. Okay. So we're going to be using the medium white. So make sure you have a lot of that out. I want to use the paint straight, not thin down, unless it starts getting thick on me. I like to use it fresh from the bottle so that I get a little better coverage. However, I usually moisten my brush first. Now, usually a deer foot brush, I don't moisten. That I will just go ahead and get a little bit on the toe of the brush. But my wave brushes, I'm going to moisten, blot them off on the paper towel. Okay, so when I load this for the wave brush, I'm actually plumping it up or smashing it into the brush, patting it, you know, on the side, on each side, but I want to be able to see those little wavy tips. So let me show you that first, and then I'll show you the deer foot or a stippler brush. So I'm holding it in my hand like I would a pencil. So, and then I'm just tapping that texture in to create the fur. And the wave brush has little, you know, gives you like little wiggly texture lines. And I would start up in that bump area, and I'm going to work my way to where the nose is, but I'll just keep going until I run into the eye. I'm going to do the nose area separately. So I want every section to be a little bit separate, and I'm just stippling that in. And when I get to the eye, I will also stop. Reload as often as you need to. Don't go into the wrinkles yet. Right about where the eye is, and then I will stop. Now I want to see teeny tiny little specks of black, but not great big ones. Okay, so I don't want it solid, 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 but I don't want to see big gaps either. Okay, so that side is with the wave filbert. Now let me show you a deer foot. Let's see, and I've got like a 3/8 inch deer foot here. This happens to be a Americana one that was actually made for them by Dynasty. But you take the long toe, and that's what you're going to load, is just the toe. Get the extra off on your palette. Okay, so now when I do this, I'm going to just stipple that in. It's just a slightly different look, but it's still going to work. Okay, so that's going to work. Just load the toe, point the toe towards that top edge, and do it in, do it like in, I'm going back and forth like in a row as I stipple that, I guess. Kind of creating a row back and forth. Reload as often as you need to. Stay away from where the eyes are. And try to have a little bit gentler, you know, grip on your, when you're pouncing. If you are a little bit more gentle when you pounce, it'll look a little bit more airy and textured. When you smash down, it just fills it all in solid. So whatever brush it is that you have for stippling. Now you're going to need a smaller deer foot too when we get into little areas where I can manipulate my one size wave filbert because I'm just using the tips. One of the other things about the wave angle is I can set it like right on the edge and get a cleaner edge on the outside of the face than I can with a deer foot. So you might have to take, gosh, even a little round brush or something and just kind of stipple with the round brush to clean up your outer edges. Now, when it does come to doing the wrinkles in the eye, you're going to have a smaller brush. A deer foot might be too big. You maybe could do it with a small round brush. You just have to work at it a little bit more, or even a regular filbert in the wrinkle area. You're not going to see probably quite as much texture in there as you do in the rest of the fur. So I want it to be probably just a little bit more solid in the wrinkle area than what I did in the rest of the fur at the moment. And that's where the wave filbert comes in nice, because you can get skinny. So whatever brush you use to stipple, if you can use it skinnier or just really just get it on the very, very tip, that's going to help. Before we do that, though, we probably could go ahead and do the horns up above. And when you do those, leave just the littlest bit of a gap between where the bump of the head is and the horns when you're filling that in, and just stipple in those horns. I don't even know if that's the right name for them. And if anyone's a animal enthusiast and has proper names for some of the areas, you can let me know. I just want to stipple in, get texture in the horn area, but not the round ball yet. Leave those till after. Okay, now that very first wrinkle above the eye, I want a little thicker so that it pops up. I want to really be able to see where that is. So a little bit thicker paint, but it's still a stipple so that it'll be irregular. But if it becomes a little more solid area, that's okay. They have lots of wrinkles, and they're really very cool. I mean, their fur and their skin and their big bulgy nose are, when you start painting them, you don't realize how funny looking some of those areas are, but that's what makes them so special. So right now I'm just doing the top wrinkle on the eye, and I just, kind of pull that point down somewhere between, the eye and the nose there. And then I just keep adding wrinkles until the area is filled in, but leave a little hairline to see between wrinkles. Doesn't matter how many wrinkles you have. More is better. Also, I want the wrinkle to kind of connect to the outside of the eye. So when I'm pulling this, wherever I've drawn the corner of my eye, I want it to come down and touch that a little bit, because it'll finish framing the eye in for me. And I'll do that on both sides for that last little wrinkle. I want it to come and touch the corner of my eye that I drew in. Okay. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is the nostrils before I go any further. There again, this can be a little bit thicker, all right, because I want a nice edge, but I'm still stippling it. But I want to stipple in the nostrils, and I'm actually going to go all the way around about the same width. So whatever brush is going to fit in that area, and if you have to switch to like a round or a regular filbert, you're just going to use the tips to pounce. And I'm still, whatever method you were using to stipple, just continue with that. So on the top of the head, make it a little thicker on that nose piece, but then lighten it up as you go down. But I want to be able to see where that curve is. I don't want it to blend into the other fur because I want to be able to see where it is. But we're going to stipple, but I'll get the top edge a little thicker just so I'll remember where it is. But we're going to stipple all the way down, getting that in there. Okay, now I could probably just, mine would go faster if I switched to a Deerfoot brush. I just want to get that texture. And I'm just pointing the toe towards the top of the head so that I continue to get texture in that fur area. I don't change the direction of my brush. I just keep going back and forth, kind of like I'm making rows. And then I can go a little bit along the edge so that I can get a little bit more paint on the edge as well. But otherwise I want to keep that brush just kind of curving back and forth. Getting that texture in there. Lighten up a little bit between the nostrils so that you don't lose where those nostrils are. Okay. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to be able to stipple from the bottom up. Okay, but the first thing I want to do is I want to address where the eyes are, because I want to get that bag under the eye to connect to each of the corners. And if it's easier to stipple with a round brush, do that. But I want, ignore the pattern because we each have a little bit different shape right now. So take a look at what I've got here. I've got my brush pointing down now to the bottom of the bag of the eye, and I go from that round and I connect that to the corners of the eye. I want to make sure that that's going to connect. Then I'm going to finish stippling and fill that in. But make sure that it touches the corners of the eye, because that's a big bulgy eye socket that holds that big round eye in. They have the most beautiful eyes and the most beautiful lashes. Their lashes are really long. Okay, once I get the bags under the eyes, then I'm going to start with the rest of it. And I'm going to start from the chin. I'm going to stipple that in, and I just keep going back and forth, filling in till I reach the mouth area. Leave myself just a little gap so that I remember where that mouth is. And then I'll do the mouth next. And it doesn't hurt for that very first little stipple, you know, when you're separating objects, to have it a little heavier so that you have, you know, it's like the chin area, it was thinner when I left off stippling there, so then I get a little bit more on the brush when I do the top of the mouth area there. And just keep stippling in that direction until you run into the nostrils. That'll finish closing up that gap. But leave the black inside the nostrils themselves. And it's okay if You know, the stippling varies. Some places are lighter than others. That's okay. By the time we get all of our other colors on here, it all pulls together. This is just our undercoating. But I want a nice stipple. Finish closing up on each side of the nose as well. Any other, you know, big black areas other than the nostrils, finish getting all that stippled in. And on the baby here. Okay, so take a look on each side of the nose on my baby. One side, it's a hairline division that I can still kind of follow. This top area, that's way too big of a gap. If I can see like a black line, it's too much. I just want to see a little hint. Otherwise, it's going to be too hard to camouflage that when we do the next steps. So I have to just go back and just dab a little bit more to kind of take care of that big black area. But if you look close, I can still follow where that shape is, but it's not a huge gap. I'm going to switch to the Deerfoot brush, or I can even use, like I said, I could use some kind of a, you know, a foliage brush to stipple with. Whatever is going to get the job done on the neck, because we want to get that in there quickly. That just all gets stippled in. And I try to do it in kind of a rounded section. So I'm going to have the brush pointing down. So just kind of take a look. I've just exaggerated here. Instead of straight across, if you'll stipple it a little bit more rounded, it's going to give the neck a little bit more of a round look. Just a little bit thicker bead of paint on the Deerfoot, but careful when you set it down. Don't push too hard. I still want to see that texture, but I want a little bit more prominent edge. So I guess you could do that first if you wanted to. But 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 then when I go to stipple in, I want to make sure that I'm curving my stipple so that it makes it look like the neck is curved. And I'm not worried if I get some areas a little, you know, more solid than others, because by the time I get all the spots and everything on there, it all is going to blend in just fine. There again, I don't want great big black gaps. I want it textured, but I don't want to see big black gaps on the fur. And then it's probably better to go ahead and switch to like a little round brush or something to get closer to the baby's ear, because you don't want to stipple the ear. So I'll come back and I'll address that extra thick black area with a small brush. Just stipple with the tip of a round brush would be easier to transition. You just want to make sure that you keep it rounded. So I'm just showing you the direction here. I don't want to leave that gap, but I just want to show you a sample of the direction that I am curving it. So doesn't hurt to give yourself a little guideline. Okay, so I've got that in there, but I want to do the touch up near the baby's ear. Now, of course, the wave filbert, I can get right up close with that. But for those of you that don't have that, let me show you with a real small round brush. I'm just going to get the paint on the brush, and instead of pulling a line, I'm just tapping with the tip so that I still have texture, and I can get right up close to the baby's ear, but just a real gentle little tap with the tip of a round brush so that you can get closer to the ear on the baby. I don't want it to be an outline. I don't want it to be solid. Another thing I want to do is I want to get the color in the horns, and you can either use the the wave filbert, you can use a rake, you could use a liner brush. The liner brush is going to take longer, so let's go ahead and use a rake brush if you have one. Okay, so now for the round horns here, I'm going to use a raw sienna color and thin it with a little bit of water, probably about half and half. You need it to come off your brush. Okay, and then I just want to pull from the base up and follow the curve, but I want to go off the top edge of my outline, and I want those to be fuzzy tips on them. Okay, and this is just the base coat, so when I do the final detail, I'll be using a liner and I can get those a little bit better. But I'm just kind of filling in, but I want fuzzy tips, so you got to go beyond your little circle that you've got. Okay, now while we have that rake brush, we could actually do the ear hair in the ears. And when you look at that, it comes from the outside edge in towards the center of the ear. So I'm actually starting right at where we outlined the bottom edges of the ear. I still want to be able to see black on the far side in the ear. And we're going to start with the medium white. And it's going to be a little bit thicker where it touches, so I might have to come back and do, you know, a little second coat, but I'll start and let's see the direction it curves. So I start right on the edge and I'm going to curve in. Now if I lose all my black, I can come back and do black the opposite direction. Okay, so now I want more next to the ear, but I'm worried more about these fuzzy tips than I am making it solid against that outline. So I get my fuzzy tips first, then I'll come back and add a little bit more at the base, a little bit shorter strokes to be able to fill that in. If I take the brush and I pull on the chisel next to that outline, that beige outline, I can get a little bit more solid. Or I could come back with a liner brush and do that. But I just take the chisel edge and then while that's wet, pull out from it so that it's a little thicker or a little heavier right at the baseline, but nice fuzzy tips coming in towards the black area. So chisel edge and then pull. So it's like I'm outlining that beige edge with the chisel edge of my rake brush, if that makes sense. So I have it more solid right up against that beige line. Okay, now the mama's ear, you're only seeing a portion of it, remember, because it goes off the edge of the canvas. So first I worry about the strokes and getting the tips where I leave off with that stroke. I worry about that first, then I'll come back and do the solid area next to the beige line. There again, I've got to tell myself to slow it down on a canvas because of the crevices. If I pull too quickly, all it does is catches the top little nubs of the canvas and it doesn't sink into the, you know, the little holes. So I got to go a little bit slower, give the paint time to come off the brush when I do the canvas. Wood piece is usually a little smoother, unless it's really rough. And I'll just use the chisel edge of the brush to kind of outline next to the beige and pull some shorter strokes. And then that finishes making it a little bit heavier next to the beige. This is the medium white and I'm just using the rake. Now I could have been using the wave brush also because I can get, in fact, let me just show you with that. I'll show you on the baby. So I would still thin the paint just like I do for rake brush consistency, you know, half paint, half water. But I get up on the very tips, you know, I've got those wavy little tips and I get up on the very tips and I can pull in, just barely tickle, and see I can get close to the same look. Barely tickle with those tips and I can get the nice little lines, you know, outline, go back a second time, get it a little bit thicker next to the ear or next to that beige outline. But you can manipulate this wave filbert the same. Just barely tickle with the tips. It's actually a cool little brush. So just the handle is straight up in the air, and I'm just pulling in. Get those little fuzzy tips just like I do with a rake brush. I'll go back and use the chisel to kind of outline next to the beige. And then while that's wet, just pull in some shorter strokes so it's a little more solid next to the beige line. Okay, so these little templates that have lots of circles, they're really handy to have it for your painting when you're doing eyes and you're trying to get a round pupil. I mean, you can set this up and see what size is going to look, you know, the best within the area that you're working in. So if I were to put that in there, I can just, you know, take like a pencil or a chalk pencil and go ahead and make my circles so that I have them more the same size. Is that the same one? Yep, that's the same one. But I want it to touch the top eyelid. Now another thing I do is I'll use a coin, and I'll take a coin and that looks like it's the right size. So if you have any coins like pennies or dimes or nickels, this looks like it's probably the size of a nickel for the mama. And then we're going to fill that pupil in with black. It's going to touch the top eyelid. Nice round circle at this stage. Just going to see a crescent shape left of the burnt sienna after. Okay, now the corners of the eyes, instead of black, and I know it's not a huge difference, but I want them to be burnt umber instead of black. Now it's just being picky. Probably nobody would notice the difference if you left it. But if you get a little bit of burnt umber and tuck that in the corners of the eyes would be great. But just tuck that little bit of burnt umber in the corners. And remember, those corners are pretty small. Don't want them to dominate. We can always, you know, if we decide after that they're too big, all we got to do is just outline with our off-white again, with our medium white, and make them smaller. And we're going to put like a little crescent shape inside that burnt sienna. We're going to use raw sienna for that. And I'm not even going to blend it. I'm just going to make like a crescent stroke. Now, if I want it to show up a little bit more, if it's not showing up, put the tiniest touch of yellow in it and it'll lighten up. But let me go in closer now. Let's see, I'll start with this one. Okay, so raw sienna, and use a little liner brush, or probably a round brush. Liner might be too skinny. So a little round brush, and it's like a crescent shape. It's going to be right in the middle of that burnt sienna, but I want it thicker at the bottom and then taper skinny about halfway up inside the eye itself. And I'm not going to blend that. I'm just going to leave it. By the time you get everything on there, it really does pull together. And if I need to adjust anything, I can take a liner. You know, if I get too big with that color, I can crop it off with a liner. So adjust as you need to. And then in the middle of that, I'm going to put a little thin line of white. So, but water it down a little bit more, probably a little bit transparent, but I still need it to show up. I'll get a skinny liner brush, like a 20-aught, 10-aught, and I'm going to use titanium white, so your brightest white. And I'm going to put right in the middle of that, in more in the bottom area, a white line. I think it's black. Yeah, we're going to float some black across the whole top edge inside the eye. That's where the eyelashes are casting a shadow. And so this time I'm just going to use like a small angle brush, whatever fits. I've got a 3/8, but if you need to go smaller and do a 1/4 inch, you sure can. And just do a corner load of black. So I've got just a little corner load. Now I don't have a lot of paint on there. It's kind of watered down, so it's hard to see. But I'm going to go right on top of the eye. I start from one corner and go all the way over to the other corner, so that that whole top of the eye is going to be darker. Get just a little bit more on this other side here. I really want to make sure that I go dark across that whole top. Do that on all the eyes. So corner load of black, go from one corner of the eye all the way over to the other, right through everything. And until we get more on there, they'll just look kind of sleepy right now, and that's how they're supposed to look at this stage. Okay. Under the eye, I outline it with a thin black line to now separate the eyelid and that burnt sienna circle. So I want a thin black line all across the bottom of the eye now. Okay, and then just so you know, I still at any time can adjust my eyes. Okay, so for instance, on the mama here on the right eye, if I decided this outer corner was looking too big, I would just take an outline of medium white and I can reshape it. I can crop some of that off. If I decided the eye was getting too flat, I would take black and I would outline inside the top of the eye to help lift it up. Okay, now my pupils are dry and my float across the top is dry. So I can go ahead and put the highlight in there. And what it is a white dot inside the top right of the pupil. You also could make it a square instead of a dot. If you're having light shining through from a window, it's going to be square instead of a round circle. And then if you look close at your photograph, you're going to see that there is also a transparent comma stroke that curves in the top of the eye. So I'm going to do that next. So water it down, thin it down, at least half and half, so it's more transparent. And use a small round brush, and I'm just going to pull a comma stroke curving in the top of the eye. And we're going to start getting some highlights. And there again, I'm stippling them in. Now this is where the wave angle came in handy. So I want to make sure that you're using a brush that you can get these curves. Let me see what happens if I use just a regular filbert brush. Let's see if that'll work, if I can get anything close. Let me try it. So if I just get the paint on the tips, let's see, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to stipple. Sure. You know, I think you could. I'd rather have you use like a regular filbert than Deerfoot because you're going to have more control. And because we already have stippling underneath, I think it's going to work. So if you don't have the wave filbert, use a regular filbert brush. Because what I want to do is I want to be able to lay it in my hand like I would a pencil. I'm not using the tips. I'm laying it down and I'm using like the underside of the tips to stipple my highlights and shadows in. Might have to add a little bit of water if it doesn't come off. I always try it right from the bottle first. So see, and the reason I like the wave filbert is because I get that little extra texture. So if you have it, continue using that. If you don't, you can use a regular one, and I'm loading them both the same, using them both the same. So to start with, what I want to do is I want to get some white highlight stippled in the center of the horns. Don't go all the way to the edge. Follow that curve right in the center of the horns there. I still want to see the base coat color on each side. Do both the baby and the mama. So warm white or light buttermilk, and you just use the tips of the brush, but lay it in your hand so you're not using the handle straight up in the air. You want to just use like the underside of the tips to stipple. Center of the horns. Then I want to get those top bumps on the forehead, get a little bit thicker. Now this time, if you have a little black line, you're going to cover it. You're going to close that gap up now because I'm not going to need it anymore. This will be enough to separate. So now I'm going to get rid of that black line. So it's heavier to the top of those bumps. And then I want to lose paint as I come down towards the nose until I run out of paint. So I want to still be able to see the beige next to my nose bump. So the brightest highlight is at the top of the bump, and as you stipple, you're going to run out of paint. Lighter, lighter, lighter little stipple touch as you get closer to the nose. But any kind of a black line that you left to be able to see between the horns and the forehead, now I want you to cover that up. I want you to put a little extra paint so you no longer see that black line at all. Lighter, lighter, lighter touch as you get closer to the nose so that it goes from the brighter white to the beige color near the nose. Okay, then I'm going to continue on. I want to do the top bump of the nose. And sometimes what I do is I'll pick one side to make it more dominant, and then I would try to be more consistent. Do the same side on both mama and baby, so a little bit heavier at the very top of the nose bump there, and as I come down I'm going to stick more to one side, and it doesn't matter which one, just keep it consistent for both mama and baby. So if I make it go off to, if I make the highlight more off to the right, I'm going to do the same on the baby. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of transition from white on one side to beige on the other. And when I come down the nose, I'm gonna taper it when I get closer to the nostrils. So along the nose, and there again, I'm kind of doing it in rows, that they're all coming in so that I get different starting and or different lengths of stipples within the nose, so that it's not all a straight line by the time I get done. I want it to be a little bit more, you know, some I come in further, some I stay shorter, so that it varies all the way down. As I get closer to the nostrils, I'm going to lighten up and eventually taper it in the middle here to let it just kind of disappear. So just let it kind of fade away. So that's the area when you're running out of paint. That's the area you do between the nose when you run out of paint. Okay, another spot that we want to do is each of the wrinkles. You're only doing, maybe half of it half of it is highlight, the other half is the beige. You don't want to just fill them in. So I'll get heavier on the top edge and just halfway into it, couple little stipples. So above the eye, heavy on the top edge of a wrinkle, and just kind of pull a little skinny taper down in towards the corner of the eye. So get the top edges first, and then just a couple little taps to have it come into the middle a little more. However many wrinkles you can get in there is fine. Sometimes I can only get 2, sometimes I get 3, but I'm definitely covering that black line that is separating them now. Just the wrinkles, not the eyelid. So just the wrinkles. Top of each of the wrinkles, and just a couple little taps below the top edge so that it transitions better. Okay, and then I'm also going to get the tops of the nostrils. And I'm only going to come, about halfway. So a lot heavier on the very top corners, and then kind of run out of paint as you come down the sides. And they do get a little bit more filled in as opposed to how we did the wrinkles. I had it white on top and beige, you know, in the creases. But now on the nostril, these top corners, and then let it fade to, you know, you have that little area that it kind of dents out, that little triangle shape. So let it fade by the time you get to that area. But otherwise, it's kind of filled in that top area. And then fade as you come down the side. I'm going to do the bag under the eye. I do that bottom edge and then just kind of taper it as I come up towards the eye itself. So it blends from lots of color to no color by the time it gets to the eye. A little bit thicker on that bottom edge, and also use that to get rid of any black line that you had there to be able to show the separation. Just taper it towards the corner. Okay, and then I'm going to do the bottom of the chin, but I'm going to keep it a little bit more off to the side that I chose for my highlight on my nose. So when I do the chin, you know, I'll get it there again. I can do a little bit heavier on that bottom edge, but then I'm going to have it heavier off to the right side of my giraffe. Let it kind of fade into the beige on the other side, just like I did up on the nose. I kept more beige on the left side. And when I come up the edge of the face there, then I'll also, I think it's easier just kind of stipple where the edge of the face is. So you have a little bit more of an outline type thing. Then I can come in a little ways from that edge with some of the white. But not all the way across, just a little ways in from that edge, going up the one side of the face. Same thing on the mouth. Heavier across where it divides. Make sure you're covering up any line, any black line between the mouth and the chin that you left. And then it's going to be more white on the right side. A little bit heavier on that right side so that I can separate it, you know, from the face area. But really lighten up on your stippling as you pull in through the center so it'll fade. And like I said, if we get too much when we do our, you know, our shading colors, we'll be able to adjust and take away some of the white if we got too much. So that on the baby, instead of coming up, you know, that other side of the face here, the highlight would have been on that little tiny area off to the right. So just tap a little bit in that area. So if you look at the picture, the inside areas of the nostrils, I'm going to want to put a little bit to just connect just the inner ends because of the way the nostril is curved. So just those two sections that are closer to the middle, I am putting the white, well, the white on my brush is pointing into the black hole, but I'm on the piece of nostril that is closer to the center of his face. But I'm connecting that into the upper edge so that it looks like that white is now connecting the edge into the top highlight, just on those inside sections, not the outside bottom sections.